So the Chaos cult had infiltrated the local military. Energized by the incident, we proceeded with the rest of the test candidates quickly with more stringent measures, like tying them down to heavy chairs during the procedures and checking their inner cheeks. Nothing extraordinary happened with the rest of them, and by the time we were done I was informed by Herlin Dyer that Thabrus had arrived and wished to meet me at the crime scene. Through some persuasion I managed to drop all the girls to meet the Inquisitor alone. Neandra was guarding the sealed-off room when I arrived. I nodded while passing and she bowed. Like her boss, I noted the assassin's surface thoughts were totally unreadable. Inside the room the Inquisitor was studying the remains of my victim while squatting down, looking every bit like an overworked homicide detective. "SYRINE." He nodded. "Inquisitor. I see you made a mess of this heretic." "Sorry," I reacted with too much force. "Should have kept him alive for information gathering. I believe we aren't missing much." He shook his head. "Remember the gunman at the gate?" As expected, nothing much came up during their interrogation. The insidious cult we are dealing with are too careful for such amateurish mistakes. A professionally operated chaos cult? My own impression of such cults was that they were usually just loud and semi-unorganized, but this insidious version seemed a lot more dangerous. I have ordered all of the detained rebel troops to be double-checked for this. The cult's infiltration was way worse than anticipated, Thabrus said while standing up before dropping a surprising praise. "Your rapid pace of work is truly commendable." "You didn't come all the way just to compliment me, right?" I asked jokingly. He returned a side stare and scoffed. "Of course not. My interest in the result of your work aside, there is a person I would like you to meet." "Who?" "You have seen him before, he has been a guest here since the day we met," he said cryptically. It took a moment before I realized who he was referring to. "You meant the Space Marine?" "Correct." Accompanied by Neandra, I followed Thabrus' lead and we headed downstairs. So the Sororitas Monastery had fortified underground levels where they housed their dungeons. I lamented my decision of not exploring the place yesterday night with my projection. Back then, after learning to project for the first time, my instinct was to fly towards the shining city on the horizon instead of checking out what was literally beneath me. The deeper we went, the grimmer the atmosphere became. Most of the walls were carved out from solid, obsidian rock, and the passages were barely lit by flickering torches and some eerily glowing illumination technology. The air was thick with the scent of decay and despair, and the only sounds were the echoes of our footsteps. Eventually we reached a heavy gate leading to the actual dungeon. You could tell they were not fooling around as it was guarded by sisters armed with storm bolters. These ridiculous things were double-barreled version of the standard bolter, usually found mounted on top of Rhino-armored transports, or wielded by elite Astartes Terminators. As we entered the final door to a reinforced prison chamber I smelled the Astartes way before he came into view. I remembered reading in a novel about some humans complaining about the body odor of space marines in real life. That was sort of expected, as gigantic genetically altered muscular humans, they were already more beast than baseline human in terms of body mass, and that was before considering their usual routine of wearing fully sealed power armor for extended periods of time. But all things considered, the stink was not too bad. I could tell the scent was similar to that of normal humans, just a lot more intense and complex. My mind was filled with such triviality when the massive figure we came to visit came into view. He was imprisoned in the last cell of the chamber. The Marine was not alone. Two figures who I recognized, Sister Hospitella Verita and Margus Balprijus, stood beside the subdued transhuman. Both bowed as we entered. As for the Marine, he was stripped of his armor and missing all his limbs like I remembered. Secured with heavy chains, he was pinned onto the wall in a crucified pose. A myriad of tubes of unknown functions were inserted into his body in various places. His eyes were closed and a half mask was placed over his mouth, probably to prevent more acid-spitting attacks. The Marine was in a bad shape. Illuminated by the harsh artificial lights inside the cell, countless scars could be seen running like angry centipedes on his hypermuscular body. "Inquisitor, We inspected the prisoner as requested. Everything was within expected parameters. Valpraju's reported. "Thank you, Margus," Faberus said. "Is he sleeping?" I asked, curious. The prisoner is in a self-induced deep meditative state, one of the standard Astartes approaches to conserve energy while being imprisoned. It can also be used to ignore standard physical torture during interrogations. Valprajus explained. The Margus words made me do a double take on the Marine's condition. Now that I got a closer look, it became clear some of the wounds on him were quite fresh, and I winced internally at the implication of recent tortures. Eager to get this over with, I turned to Faberus. "What do you need me to do?" "I was hoping with your powers you could double-check if he was compromised by chaos corruption. We need to know how big a threat he and his kin are to this world," the Inquisitor said softly, but his explanation only raised many more questions. "May I ask, why are you asking me to do it? Shouldn't this be better handled by seasoned professionals like your psychers?" I asked bluntly. "We have already tried it." "And?" That got me more curious. The results were inconclusive. While my psychers being overworked might have been a contributing factor, we suspect this individual was trained to resist psychic interrogation. That could only be achieved if they have psyker in their rank. Faberus remarked grimly. A rogue librarian or a sorcerer? That sounded troubling indeed. "All right, what do I need to do?" I conceded. "Try reading his mind for their objectives here and check for any signs of chaos corruption," Faberus instructed. "Huh? I never told anyone about my ability to read minds yet." "Who said I could read minds?" I asked, testing the water. He shrugged. "I thought it should be natural for a psyker of your caliber. Do what you can to gather any information." "Is this another test?" I could do nothing but to proceed with his request. Standing this close to a real Astartes, the human side of me experienced for the first time the full impact of what it meant to come face to face with an absolute physical superior of your species. Being this close, the Marine looked much bigger and imposing from my point of view. Even while seemingly totally incapacitated, I felt the raw power residing in his over-exaggerated chiseled form, and it filled me with a deep sense of uneasiness. It was akin to being in close proximity with a huge predator. The human part of my mind went hyperactive and kept nagging me about the present danger. But I am the bigger threat here, right? I quieted down my mind and considered what I had learned so far. My interaction with Carthalina seemed to imply that skin contact amplified my mind-reading ability. I decided on my approach, raised my hand up to reach for the Marine's gigantic bald head before realizing I had severely underestimated the difference of our stature. Slightly flustered, I pointed to a readily available tool to remedy the situation. "Pass me the chair, please." No one commented about my vertically challenged status, and Verita moved to help. Soon I was standing on top of a chair, and my hand finally reached the Astartes' smooth cranium and touched the skin of his forehead. It felt surprisingly smooth but cold. I willed myself to read his surface thoughts but sensed resistance. Not only was I unable to read the Marine's mind, his mental wall was actively repelling my attempts. Going nowhere, I closed my eyes and upped my game. Psychana Activa, activated. Instinctively I synced my breathing with the Marine while my powers engulfed him. At first the resistance of his mind held, but as I started pumping more and more power it began to wane. "Come on, let me see your mind. Come on, come on, come on." Simulatio, activated, huh? Suddenly I entered an altered state and found myself in a void. Immediately I came to an innate understanding. My mind was syncing with the Marine, and this vision was a placeholder for us to meet. At first there was nothing, then slowly I heard some voices and saw a figure illuminated by dim lights in the distance. As I moved towards the light, the surroundings changed and morphed into a grassy field with a starry night sky. I moved closer to the figure and sure enough it was the Marine. Here he was whole again with all his limbs intact. For some reason, in this vision he wore a set of scout armor instead of power armor. Seated on the ground in a meditative posture, he was chanting away while a small campfire, the source of illumination I saw earlier, flickered in front of him. "Hello." I greeted the Marine, but he just continued his chanting, which turned up to be some space marine mantra. "In the furnace of war we are forged. We are his finest warriors. We give ourselves to his will. We are his bulwark against the terror. We are the tip of his spear, the edge of his sword. We are defenders of humanity, and we shall know no fear." On and on he murmured with practiced ease. I looked at his solemn expression and listened to his words for a while before coming to a conclusion. The only way he could be a traitor was that he was an Alpha Legion operative, an unlikely scenario. "Greetings, Space Marine," I said, but he just continued to ignore me while chanting. I thought for a moment on what could break the ice and said, "I would like to talk to you about your brothers on the Shadow Talon." It was the name of the Thunderhawk gunship I glimpsed with my very brief interaction with its machine spirit. After hearing the gunship's name, he finally stopped chanting and slowly opened his eyes. Just when I thought we could start a conversation, he just checked on his hands and refused to look at me. While I had no idea on how any of this worked, in the real world he no longer had his hands, so I just let him have his moment. After a while he finally spoke. "Which? This vision is your doing?" the Marine asked with an accusatory tone. He had a deep and powerful voice, yet there was a hint of unmistakable youthfulness. Not keen on being labeled by that term, I replied with a question. "I am a psyker, not a witch. Would you call the Emperor a witch?" His massive body twitched almost unperceivably after hearing my words, but he remained silent after that. Seeing the window to talk was rapidly closing again, I tried to stir up conversation. "For real, I have no idea why you are made whole here. You might be just missing your limbs." I stated the truth. Being quite a bad liar all my life, I had decided to be truthful whenever possible as a standard policy. The Marine seemed surprised by my answer and finally looked at me. While we exchanged stares, I finally had a good look at his face. "Is he still a kid?" Superficial Astartes features aside, his face, his posture, his eyes, everything about him made me feel like I was dealing with a youngster who was barely 20 years old. "Now that I have answered your question, it is only fair that you answer one of mine," I said, wanting to make him talk before he walled up again. "Tell me, why did your brothers on the Shadow Talon spare my life when they had the chance to eliminate me?" He looked at me in disbelief and I pressed my advantage. "They had their chance with the turbolaser destructor. I was fighting a greater demon. Your brothers shot the demon, not me." His eyes widened further, but still his lips were sealed. I waited for an answer that never came and even sensed he was withdrawing again. Seemed like expecting straight answers just like that was asking too much. I needed to take a step back. "All right, if you do not wish to talk about your brothers, what about just telling me where this place is?" I asked, looking at the eerily quiet alien landscape around me with its unfamiliar vegetation. 3 small moons were in the night sky and the star constellations were totally different from Earth's. "This is my home world." Surprisingly, he talked. "It is really different from mine," I remarked. "Show me yours?" he asked. Since this vision was created by my power, it should be within my ability to change it. I started envisioning a beautiful summer night on old Earth. My Primarch level of cognitive ability constructed the overall setting before rendering the finer details in my head. Satisfied with the vision, I then willed what was in my mind into existence and our surroundings suddenly changed. This is so cool, like playing as a virtual director in real life. The 3 small moons were no more, replaced by a single large moon on the night sky while the star constellations became familiar. A nice breeze brushed against my face, making my hair flow while carrying the sound of crickets chirping in the distance. Instead of the previous quietness, the air became filled with a gentle hum of nature, and then a sea of fireflies appeared. I sat down on the soft patch of grass across the marine and watched in amazement as the fireflies began their mesmerizing dance. Their tiny lights flickered in the darkness, creating soft glows that illuminated the surrounding foliage as they moved gracefully around each other, forming intricate patterns and shapes in the night sky. I gazed up at the constellations above and was struck by their sheer beauty. For reasons unknown, I recognized the constellations from old Earth even though I was never a stargazer. The Orion constellation was definitely the most recognizable. That other one was Canis Major with Sirius, the brightest star in the sky. Then there was the Ursa Major, often used as a navigational tool before the global positioning system became common. Were they in my memory from the countless documentaries I watched or? Regardless, I had never seen stars this clearly before. Primarch-grade senses together with psychic sorcery had brought the constellations to life in this vision, and they twinkled and shone like diamonds in the sky. I sat quietly in the idyllic setting and was reminded that back on my Earth the light pollution had made it almost impossible to pick out the stars from the night sky. Then there was my severe case of myopia. Many decades of excessive gaming and questionable lifestyle had deteriorated my eyesight significantly in my old self. Such a sight was out of the question in my old life. Surrounded by the magical scenery, warm glow of the fireflies with the soft chirping of the crickets as soothing ambience, I lost myself in the simulated tranquility. "Well, you are certainly enjoying yourself." The Marine brought my focus back to him, a hint of frustration in his deep voice. I looked at him and smiled. "It is not as if you are talking much. This looks amazing, no?" He looked around and finally nodded. "Where is this?" I thought of the current state of humanity's cradle where the oceans were long gone and sighed in response. "The place looks a lot different now. This scene exists only in memory." "Is that so?" he replied flatly. We stayed silent for a while, just enjoying the relaxing atmosphere with the soft crackling of his campfire. Looking into the fire, I noticed an unusual item. "What is that?" I asked, pointing at the thing in the flames. To me it seemed to be a personalized Inquisition rosette, a stylized eye held by dragon claws. When the Marine saw the rosette, his previously impassive face flashed with anger and disgust for a microsecond before he closed his eyes, refusing to interact further. "Hello?" I asked, but he remained silent like a statue. I considered my options and realized in this false world my powers had fully engulfed him. A brute force approach to accessing his memories was possible, leaving him at my mercy. "I don't want to do this, cooperate or you will leave me with no choice." I warned him, hoping he would play nice, but received silence. Reluctantly I powered up and began pushing into his mind. He resisted. While his willpower was as strong as steel, as I gradually increased my output it became clear he would not last forever. Soon he was sweating profusely under intense pressure. I could tell it was only a matter of time before his mind or something else would break. As the Marine suffered in silence, I noticed the campfire that had been burning brightly only moments before had dimmed considerably. I looked at the strange fire and felt its connection with the Marine. This fire is a representation of his life force? Curious to see what would happen, I reduced my output and observed the campfire brightening up as if it was responding to the release of pressure. To further test my theory, I eased up further and was validated in the next moment as it flared up immediately. Looking at the intensity of the fire, I came to a grim conclusion. He would have died if I had pressed on. I looked at the Marine again. He carried no signs of corruption and was ready to die for his brothers. He never relented and I did not want to kill him. We had reached an impasse. I released my power over him and immediately found myself back in the cell again, my hand still on the Marine's head. Unlike before, the Marine's forehead was warm like he was having a fever, and he was sweating heavily just like in the vision. Feeling disorientated, I looked around and found Verita behind me, ready to catch me in case I fell off the chair. "How long did I close my eyes?" "About half a minute," Faberus replied. 28.3 seconds to be exact. Balpragus remarked. "What the hell, time dilation?" I had read about scenarios like this in the novels, characters experiencing lengthy otherworldly visions only to return to their reality where not much actual time had passed. "How was it?" Faberus asked. "I could push through his mental barrier, but he might die. Let's talk outside." We left the cell, went to a secured room next door and sat down to talk. A while later I finished my story, ... I found no trace of chaos corruption on him. Lastly, he seems to have a distinct distaste for the Inquisition. Please elaborate. Before that, could you tell me what you know about this Marine and his chapter? Fabris took a long look at me before offering his opinion. No offense, but I think it is unwise to involve you in such matters at this moment. Unconvinced, I was about to argue with the Inquisitor before realizing my own shortcomings. Despite having some amazing abilities and the baseline of a demigoddess, I was still hopelessly dependent on the people around me to navigate this world. I had no access to money, no concept of the norms of daily life inside the Imperium, nor do I possess any basic life skills like operating mundane vehicles in this world. Heck, I did not even understand the basics of my body and could not even properly control my own physical strength. Wait. Am I currently close to being a useless goddess level of meme existence like Aqua the water goddess in Konosuba? Mentally pummeled by a series of sudden critical self-reflections, I was just looking down at the ground and lost in my thoughts when Fabris broke my stupor. Psychic exertion catching up? I think that is enough power usage for you today. I have a few places to visit and will be going soon. Please give a more detailed report on the interrogation session to Herlindire, he said with a hint of concern. I thought for a moment before asking, are you going anywhere dangerous today? Why? Fabris looked up with a glint in his eyes, no doubt second-guessing my motive. Pointing to the wall where my senses easily detected the presence of Neandra, I smiled and replied, if it is possible, I would like to borrow her for half a day. Again, why? After listening to my reasons, Fabris consented to my request but only agreed to lend me the Imperial Assassin for a few hours. He made the arrangements and soon left, leaving me alone to deal with his most deadly operative. Looking lethal as ever, Neandra approached me with the grace of a prowling predator. She knelt down respectfully and said, Lady SYRINE, you need my service? Neandra, I heard from the others that it was you who carried me to the Black Star from that muddy field. For that you have my thanks. As for now, I have a request. Being the only transhuman I could talk to, you could say she might be the most relatable person I had in this world at this moment. Neandra looked up from her kneeling position, her expression telling me to go on. Teach me how to access my transhuman strength and on top of that, some basic fighting skills, I said. Upon hearing my request, a subtle expression of hesitation flashed on her ice-cold pretty face, but she didn't reply immediately, so I pressed on. You are free to withhold any technique you do not wish to share. I just need the basics. As you command. She relented. There is also this thing I need to ask you. My apologies to you in advance, it is quite an intimate question. I bent down, putting a hand up to whisper my question. Neandra looked confused for a second before she leaned over. I had many questions to ask, but decided to go with the very fundamental issues first. How many times do you need to go to the washroom a day? The seemingly simple subject I asked ended up being an in-depth topic of its own right. Between genetically engineered organs with a more efficient digestive and waste management system, there were many factors that could muddle the frequency of a transhuman's need to visit the bathroom. From Neandra's limited knowledge on the subject matter, a few standard Terran days of not needing to visit the loo was normal for most transhumans. On the extreme end of example, the Vindicare assassins of the Officio Assassinorum, the ultra-elite snipers who trained their art of marksmanship to near perfection, were known to stay still for many days in a single position just to get a chance to eliminate their quarry with a single gunshot. Another issue to consider were the extra layers of cybernetic enhancements and built-in waste management plus recycling systems in advanced suits. For example, the Astartes power armor had built-in systems that could sustain a marine's metabolism without needing to stop to eat or drink while taking care of waste management. No one had ever heard of a space marine looking for a washroom in the middle of a war zone, and they were known to be confined in their power armor for months in brutal void warfare where taking one's suit off for a leak was out of the question. Then there was my case where my physiology was practically state secret. I really have no idea. Neandra said while shaking her head, her long ponytail swinging from side to side. The level of engineered organs aside, I have heard of rumors about psykers who can alter bodily functions with the deeper mastery of their powers. When it comes to you, both aspects are of unknown quantifiers. She looked dead serious when delivering her conclusion. We returned to the upper floor just as our conversation wrapped up and was received by Herlin Dyer and the rest. Preacher Malin has gone through all the remaining test candidates and the initial results are promising. Herlin Dyer reported. While that was certainly good news, the sample size was too small and the progress too slow for what we needed. Very well. Kindly arrange a fresh batch for tomorrow, add some variety and increase the number of candidates by half. Please look into methods that can increase the efficiency of the whole process. I said. My lady, you are doing this again tomorrow? We have to show it to the world. Malin exclaimed, hardly able to contain her excitement. I am sure the Archdeacon and the rest of the senior clergy would be honored to witness you performing the Emperor's miracle. May I invite them over? Bringing the high-hat fella and his gang to watch me work? I had mixed feelings about Malin's suggestion. The notion of turning my work into religious propaganda just did not sit right with me. But as an outsider I had to concede due to my limited knowledge of the local politics, the pros and cons of such an action was beyond me. It was time to consult the professionals. I looked at Herlin Dyer with puppy eyes. She quickly got the hint and dropped the conditions for Malin's request. Esteemed members of Adeptus Ministorum are welcome to witness Lady SYRINE performing her work, but due to special circumstances every visitor has to be vetted by the Inquisition beforehand and no recordings will be allowed. Against my expectation, Malin did not protest about the imposed conditions. Instead she quickly sorted out the details with Herlin Dyer and promptly excused herself to inform the church. I had Neandra talk to Alasaya on the arrangements needed for our little training session later and before I knew it, lunchtime had arrived. Non-militant members of Adepta Sororitas usually eat 2 meals a day, lunch around noon and dinner in the evening. Not feeling hungry at all, I declined the offer of lunch and ended up killing time at the library inside the monastery with Wellmanor by my side while waiting for Neandra to get ready. Like almost everything in the Imperium, the monastery library was huge, imposing and a sight to behold. Made up of 2 floors, the library was housed in a grand ornate chamber complete with high ceilings, wall murals, intricate carvings and stained glass windows that cast a natural glow on the many shelves of manuscripts and heavy tomes. The air inside was cool and thick with the scent of aged parchment and leather bindings. Sounds of rustling pages mixed with cogitator stations' muted beeps and whispered conversations created a serene, scholarly atmosphere. Well, it would have been perfectly serene if not for the presence of many cherubs. Goddamned creepy cherubs. These things were, basically undead and genderless babies with decorative feathery wings. Their primary means of movement was by floating around with their built-in anti-grav generators, the same principle utilized by servo skulls. Despite knowing the existence of these bio-sculpted homunculi beforehand, I had severely underestimated their grotesqueness in real life. With my typical civilian worldview from the 21st century, coming face to face with these constructs proved to be deeply disturbing, like witnessing a Halloween joke that went too far. Whoever thought of having these things hovering around in a place of study was a good idea really possessed a skewed sense of morbid aesthetics. It took me a while to get used to and ignore the many creepy cybernetic undead infants that were randomly floating about. A glance of the shelves informed me most of the books here were about topics of religious, historical and cultural significance. In essence, none of them looked interesting to me. But since I was already here, I might as well make my time productive. I reached out, retrieved a tome titled Chronicles of Nusquam and started flipping. To my surprise, I was able to thoroughly read and comprehend the contents just by casually glancing at the pages while turning them. Amazed, I continued to flip through the pages thinking this incredible instant information absorption would stop at some point, but I was sorely mistaken. It just went on and on. Page after page of text was fully read and comprehended at a supernatural speed until I freaked out and slammed the thick book shut. My sudden action made Wellmanor, who had been following me around like a lost puppy, look over with curiosity in her eyes. Did I read half the book just like that? Time to put that strange notion to the test. I passed the tome to her. Help me test something. Try reading any line in this book before page 150. Wellmanna obliged. She opened the book to a random page and started reading. The discovery of Nusquam as an exoplanet with Holy Terror's almost exact specifications is nothing short of a miraculous occurrence. That is on page 10, first paragraph. Am I correct? Let me see. You are correct. Try another page. I had visited this library multiple times. They never obey anyone except for the librarians and the tech priests. Oops. As I was wondering how to talk my way out of this, Wellmanna stepped in and explained with a straight face. As the Holy Daughter, Lady SYRINE's divinity is recognized even by the cherubs residing here. Is that so? Malin gasped. Can you kindly demonstrate again? I need to verify such claims to the Church. That should not be a problem. Am I correct, my lady? Wellmanna smiled and gave me a quick wink. I could even read what was on her mind. This is nothing compared to Baneblade tanks. As one of the inner circle people in the know, Wellmanna was present all the way from the planning through the execution of the final Civil War battle and witnessed it all. Since this was my screw-up, I might as well put up a small show to complete the white lie. Very well, I said, and mentally ordered another nearby cherub to come over while doing a beckoning gesture to complete the act. The cherub I targeted immediately dropped its routine, hovered over and landed in front of me. Do a proper greeting, I commanded. It complied, to the delight of both girls and some random sisters peeking from the corners of the library. The cherub formed the Aquila hand sign to the best of its ability and bowed. Have a seat, I ordered again, and it did as commanded, dropping its tiny back on the floor while looking at us with its unnerving eyes. Fascinating. Is it possible to ask it to do something that we have never seen before? Malin asked excitedly. She had the energy of a pilgrim witnessing a miracle and could not wait to see more. It was then I had a proper look at the cyborg baby. Through the transcendent level of intellect residing in me, I got a better understanding of these constructs. These cherubs were controlled by cybernetically augmented biological cortexes and nervous systems, which allowed them to perform simple tasks. You could say they were a more complex version of servitors with some allowed perimeters for pre-programmed self-expressions. The cherubs here were programmed with some preset tasks but otherwise reverted to a sort of holding pattern until they received overriding commands from an accepted figure of authority. Won't the librarian get angry if we made too much noise? I asked while looking around. A librarian is right here, said a sister, pointing at Wellmanna. Eh? I looked at Wellmanna. She returned my inquisitive stare with an apologetic smile. All members of the Order's Dialogus share responsibility in maintaining the monastery library. She then bent down to the cherub and talked to it like speaking to an old friend. Eta 55, resume standard routine. The cyborg baby nodded, stood back up and floated away, ending our little show. Sisters of the Dialogus Order maintaining huge monastery libraries. How did I miss something so obvious? Buzz just as the small crowd started to disperse. Wellmanna's communicator sounded. Speaking. Yes, she is with me. Very well. Wellmanna turned to me. Your training session venue is ready, would you like to go now? Yes, please. Please follow me. Upon knowing I was attending a private training session, Malin could not hide her disappointment of being unable to attend and observe. Soon, in a small training hall where only 3 people were present, my training with the Imperial Assassin started under the supervision of Verita. Strangely, on a table beside us were 2 egg trays, one was empty while the other had a dozen eggs on it. Neandra was demonstrating what she could do with her strength by bending an extra thick metallic rod into a U shape. She made it look so easy, without knowing better one would think the rod in question was a piece of modeling clay. She then straightened the rod back effortlessly before passing it to me. Here, you try it. I held on to the metal rod, felt its significant gravity pull, and was suddenly unsure if I could do it. Holding each of the rod's ends with my hands, I imitated her stance and pressed hard. The rod bent but did not go all the way. I pressed and pressed, but the piece of stupid rod stubbornly refused to bend further. Hold on a second, where did my strength go? Didn't I just cut through human flesh with a hand chop? Neandra cocked her head and crossed her arms, silently observing my helplessness for a while before commenting, "You have to go all the way." All the way. I breathed deep, increased my strength output and pressed again. The rod bent slightly further, but far from forming a U shape. "More," Neandra said flatly. Flustered, I summoned more power and in my frustration, crossed an unseen line. A scary level of strength I normally had no access to poured forth, and the metal rod gave way. It was so sudden my hands almost hit each other and the rod was bent into a teardrop shape. "Good, remember how that feels. Now bend it back," Neandra said. "Won't it eventually break from metal fatigue?" I was curious. "Not for this material." I did as told but was conscious of my crossing of the human threshold this time. The rod was easily stretched back to its straightened form and Verita gave a small applause. "Very good, now do this to see how much control you have over your strength," Neandra said while taking back the rod and started demonstrating a new sequence. First she bent the rod again. As soon as it became U-shaped she put the rod aside and moved an egg from one container to the next. Then she unbent the rod and proceeded to move another egg. "Now you try." I bent the rod as easily as before, but when I touched an egg it popped the moment my hand touched it. "Wow? Be always conscious of the amount of strength you are exerting," Neandra lectured. "Without proper control you might accidentally kill someone if you mixed up different strength usages," she explained without further elaborating, but I was already imagining a possible gruesome scenario. One moment I might be lifting something super heavy when a random person got too close. Forgetting my current strength output, I moved a hand to push the person away, and that's how you get human goo. I wiped my hand on a prepared towel and went at it again, popping 2 more eggs before succeeding with the rest. Neandra nodded in approval. "Excellent control, do this training again in the future whenever you need a refresher." That was faster than expected. "We still have some time left, what do you want to do next?" I looked at the Imperial assassin. Remembering from the games I knew their combat prowess supposedly rivaled if not surpassing even most Space Marine captains. While I was never into real fighting, would I be able to beat her in mock combat with my raw baseline stats alone? "Can we do hand-to-hand combat duels?" I asked. "Nothing that risks injuries, please," Verita chipped in quickly. Neandra just looked at me with a hint of interest until an almost impossible to perceive smirk appeared on her face. She then nodded, held up a few fingers while starting to lay down ground rules. "You heard the sister. We have to make it a safe and civilized affair. First, no usage of strength above the human threshold, something you just mastered. Second, certain techniques are off limits. No striking to the back of the head or spine, no eye gouging, no fish hooking, no biting, no hair pulling, no groin strikes." And that was how I got my first chance to test myself against a real deal. I was excited. This was the ultimate theory test of nature versus nurture. Pitting raw demigod stat lines against a seasoned and hardened Assassinorum operative would be interesting, right? Even with the low odds I got a chance at winning this, right? Under the supervision of a worried-looking Verita, I adopted a stance dug out from memories of my internet trawling days, raising my hands up before me as I crouched on solidly planted feet. Neandra in contrast relaxed herself, standing casually with her hands hanging loosely. We exchanged silent stares for a few seconds before I decided to move. I launched my body onwards, covering the distance between us in a blink of an eye. My right arm locked back, chambered and ready to whip out once I got close enough. As fast as I was with my transhuman abilities, Neandra was just as fast, if not faster. My feet barely touched the ground again when she took a step towards me and raised a hand that greeted my hurtling body. My sternum ran into her fist with a loud crack and I was sent crashing into the ground. While I reflexively winced for the impact, defying my mortal expectation, both the hit and the harsh landing did not hurt much at all. Since this body could withstand jumping from a few floors and land with contemptuous ease, this level of impact was literally nothing. Standing up, I tried again by leaping to the left to flank Neandra. The assassin replied by dashing past me and lashing her leg out. Her shin caught the back of my knees and in the next instant I was tumbling face first to meet my new friend, the ground, again. Thinking fast, I rolled into the fall, my face only briefly smashing into the floor before I pushed myself up on my feet. Before I could even regain my bearings, Neandra was suddenly right in front of me. I barely twisted away from a jab to my face, just in time to register a protest from Verita, but that only left me exposed to a rising knee into my guts. Instinctively, my hands came out to try and catch the attack, but Neandra then took the opportunity to slam her forehead into mine, soliciting another loud objection from the Sister Hospitaller. Once more I fell, and I was grateful that my body did not feel pain so keenly. Nyan. No hitting on the face. Verita berated her colleague. Relax, these levels of attacks won't leave any marks, Neandra replied calmly. Even if it did, with her physiology she would heal in no time. After catching my breath, I decided to refine my attack. I lunged straight at her for the third time, my senses tuned to the max for this focused attack. Things slowed down. In time dilation I saw how Neandra moved and could not stop myself from marveling at the sheer fluidity of her movements. Like a ghost she once more slipped past my effective fighting range, but I was ready for her. Or I thought I was. I sent a readied punch to intercept her approach, but she simply ducked under it and replied with a quick jab into the armpit of my swinging arm. Powering through the numbing impact, I used my other arm to deliver an uppercut into her body that was sure to hit. Neandra batted aside the strike with such force that I was spun about, and then I was struggling as her arms were suddenly wrapped around my neck in a tight chokehold. I futilely tried to struggle free or hit her in an effort to break her grip, but all that got me was a slow descent into the embrace of my old friend, the ground. With Neandra's legs wrapped around my arm and body, I tapped out. After being released, I voiced my objection. No fair, why am I always doing the attacking? Let me try defending for a change. Neandra almost smirked again. That can be arranged. Ouch. I got trashed. Laying on the floor looking at the ceiling, my mind was running back at how the Imperial assassin proved her lethality with expertly executed combat moves done with inhuman grace. While they say you never knew until you tried, in hindsight it was kind of expected. Despite having the body and agility of a mini demi-godling, I was overcome by Neandra's ferocity and unparalleled combat experience. The Imperial assassin displayed no fixed discernible fighting style. Her moves reminded me of various martial arts, a hint of kung fu here, a bit of karate there, flashes of judo, hints of Krav Maga and dashes of Muay Thai. The only real emphasis of all her moves was brutal efficiency and effectiveness, the whole package delivered with lightning-fast precision strikes. The fights, if you could call them that, were brief affairs that ended so fast I did not even have time to work up a sweat. The later sessions of our mock battles had become so one-sided I became frustrated and was forcing a slight resemblance of a win to no avail. My little tricks and thought acceleration proved to be little help. Neandra was always a few steps ahead, whereas momentary time freezing was just like pressing the pause button in a losing game to look around, providing little but a slight delay to the inevitable. In this ultra-tight close-quarter melee, speed and strength with precision triumphs everything. It ended with me being body slammed onto the floor, prompting Verita to call out in protest against possible injuries. Aware that Neandra's time with me was running out and yielding to her prowess, I stayed on the floor as Verita hurried over to check on me. Silly girl, such level of body slamming can't hurt an apex transhuman. I am fine, only my self-confidence is hurt. I whimpered as Neandra entered my view with her usual unreadable expression. That was bad, huh? I lamented. You telegraphed your moves too much. Your movements were fast but rigid and slightly restrained by your attire. She said matter-of-factly. Can I have more sessions like this with you? We will see. Throne be damned, I hated the idea of being in a state comparable to a useless goddess so much. Starting from now, I will do whatever I can to gain daily life proficiencies and combat prowess.